The moment the Steam Deck was available, I pre-ordered it. I was pretty excited. It looks pretty cool, and handheld PC gaming has been an ambition of mine for a while. So much so that a few years ago I made some Joyconverters which you can stick onto a Surface tablet and do some on-the-move gaming. The problem is you're limited to integrated graphics, and whilst the Surface Pro 7 had Intel Iris, which wasn't bad, there were lots of things it just couldn't run. So I am very interested to see how the Steam Deck does, and the benchmarks were very, very promising. In fact, so promising it was very clear that it was going to blow the Surface 7 away and be the ultimate handheld gaming device. But, of course, after the pre-order, there's a long waiting process, and in the meantime, I upgraded my Surface. I sold my old one and have got a Surface Pro 8 with Intel Xe graphics. But will it beat the Steam Deck? Well, let's find out. Now, the biggest problem with trying to compare the Surface Pro with the Steam Deck is that there aren't actually many benchmarks online for the Steam Deck, at least anything that can be used to compare comparable results. There are anecdotal stories of things running at 30 frames or 60 frames per second, but very little in settings and very little in graphics resolution, things like that. So the best thing I managed to find was Digital Foundry's review of the device, and I am going to compare their benchmarks with my benchmarks. Now, it's not very scientific, it's really just watching their video and comparing and seeing how we do. First off, they started with control, and they were quite impressed with their initial 60 frames per second right out of the gate. That's basically because the camera's looking at the floor and there's not much to process. But as you can see, the Surface Pro 8 really pretty much matches it. It's basically a little bit slower. But you're talking frames per second, like a couple of frames per second. You're not talking a huge amount here. It's a little bit slower. Actually, playing wise, it plays absolutely fantastically. Control. The only issue, of course, is the aspect ratio. The Surface Pro has a strange 3:2 aspect ratio, and Control stretches the screen, so you either have to have it slightly squished or slightly stretched. Or you can use lossless scaling, but the trouble is with lossless scaling is it introduces stutter, which is a bit frustrating. But basically, straight off, the Surface Pro matches the Steam Deck. Now moving on to Shadow of the Tomb Raider. In Digital Foundry, they were very impressed, of course, that these are high settings on 720p, and that it's staying above 30 frames per second. Now, the Surface Pro, basically it's a few frames behind, like talking about 2 or 3 frames behind for the most part, matches it pretty well. As you can see, it's doing alright at high settings, 720. And I don't often play at 720 actually, I tend to lower the resolution a little bit more. However, unfortunately, Tomb Raider is not very happy on the Surface Pro. As you can see, there are some graphical anomalies. This is only present in the DirectX 12 version. The DirectX 11 version doesn't have these. Unfortunately, the DirectX 11 version, the performance tanks and it cannot get anywhere near the Steam Deck. So it's a bit frustrating. It's still playable. You can play it with DirectX 11. You can actually play it with DirectX 12 and just put up with the artifacts. But this is definitely a win for the Steam Deck. Now on to Death Stranding. As with all the games in this video, I've tried to match the settings and the resolution. And as you can see, it matches the Steam Deck pretty much. Again, a couple of frames per second lower. Of course, the only issue with this is that where I happen to be in the game at the moment is a very different area than the one that they're testing on their Digital Foundry. So I reloaded a different section, and again, we're getting about 40-45 frames per second. I must say that when I was actually just playing this myself, when the action started happening, when some people started attacking me when I was playing, the frame rate did drop down to just above the 30s, but that's easily fixed by having a 30 cap, which if you want to try and save your battery life, I'd thoroughly recommend you do anyway. Now, time for Forza 5. Basically running the benchmark here, trying to match what Digital Foundry did. Again, they were very impressed with how well the Steam Deck did. This actually outperforms the Steam Deck according to their benchmark. Only a tiny bit, a couple of frames per second, but on the most part, it's the same speed, slightly faster maybe here and there, and they say this is quite a demanding benchmark, more demanding than the rest of the game. And certainly when having a quick go, the frame rates were generally higher when just driving around. But yeah, this is also with high settings, and you can easily get a much higher frame rate just by lowering the settings a little bit, lowering the resolution. So this, I would say, a draw with a borderline Surface Pro win. Moving on to Horizon Zero Dawn, and well, unfortunately for the Surface Pro, this is a clear win for the Steam Deck. For some reason, it basically can't match it, and generally about 10 frames per second slower. The benchmark I'm running at averages about 25 frames per second, and as you can see, it's pretty ugly. It's a bit stuttery, it's not very good. Interesting enough, playing the game, it doesn't feel as bad. What's very interesting though is it seems to be much more CPU limited than GPU limited, as whilst playing I can increase the graphic fidelity and not actually lose that many frames per second, which means that if you don't mind a low frame rate, it's totally playable. Just can't quite hold a fixed 30 frames per second, which is a shame. Overall, obviously I still want to get a Steam Deck, obviously I do, although whether or not I can justify it with my Surface Pro and these handy little Joyconverters on the side, well, that's another question. And the Steam Deck is obviously a new system, and it's highly likely that the performance is going to improve, and because it is a dedicated gaming system, there's going to be a lot of people actually trying to get their games to run on it properly, whereas of course the Surface Pro, not really a gaming device, no one's going to really bother. I am hoping that Intel with their own dedicated graphics card will be a little more up on their drivers than they have been in the past, and fingers crossed their new upscaling technique also helps. But the one thing that the Surface Pro does have that the Steam Deck can't match is the screen. Of course, the screen is massive. It's way bigger than the Steam Deck screen. And honestly, my eyesight is going a little bit. And that's the one thing that's really made me pause on the Steam Deck. I know there's a magnification device which can help zoom in on any text you can't read, but I always struggled massively when I had my Switch. I could never read any of the dialogue on it, and my eyesight's only got worse since then. With the Surface Pro, it's not really a problem. The screen is big enough to be able to read pretty much anything. On top of that, of course, it has a 120Hz refresh rate, so when you're going back to some old school gaming like BioShock, you can easily get over 60 frames per second. And of course, with that lovely high refresh rate, the thing feels fantastic to play in a handheld form. It really is smooth and buttery and lovely. So whilst the Steam Deck is more powerful overall, it doesn't have a 120Hz screen, and it doesn't have a big screen like this. So honestly, when my pre-order finally comes through for Steam Deck, I will definitely pick it up. I will probably have a quick go with it and see if it has any other killer features I don't know of yet. I'm sure there's probably loads. But in the meantime, I think I might play this for a little bit longer. The Joyconverters are something I designed myself and I sell on my Etsy shop. If you have a Surface Pro, from 3 to 8 they fit at the moment, you can purchase them on the link underneath the video. But for now, goodbye.